Was speaking there of a number of people camped out and a degree of perhaps confusion there, given the fact that Tunisia has its own problems. Tell us what conditions you see there. Are things manageable?
They were manageable yesterday up to about sunset, and they seem to be manageable now. Still a lot of people coming across the border. Still, I would say, a couple of thousand people at the actual border crossing on the Tunisian side who are coming through for processing. And also at a military camp about 8 kilometers into Tunisia, which we visited yesterday. There are probably a couple of thousand people there also waiting to get transport onto Jerba. And then the idea is to get them on planes and boats back to Egypt. But last night the situation deteriorated rapidly at sunset. It was very, very alarming. There was a sudden move of people, we don't know exactly why, right to the edge of no man's land between Libya and Tunisia. These people were blocked there from about 6 o'clock to after midnight when I left. And the situation was very dire for them because they had no food, no water, no sanitary facilities at all. Men, women and children, elderly, all squashed together. Some people being stretched away by the local Red Crescent workers to a Red Crescent first aid post here for treatment. I also saw babies being passed over the heads of the crowd in cots and in prams. It was a very worrying situation. Crowds were of well-wished, I suppose you could describe them, with throwing bread and bottled water over the border wall, where people were also climbing over to get into Tunisia.
Well, what's happened to those people now?
What's happening to people here?
Those people that you're describing, last night they turned up and were having some trouble. Have they now gone away?
A lot of people would have slept here overnight. The crowd of people has diminished during the night. They filtered people through. People are coming through now in a more orderly fashion, but there is still quite a bit of tension. I saw a journalist being roughed up by the crowd here for filming. They're not normally supposed to be able to get into the border gates. Journalists are kept a bit back. The two of them were being pushed around. There's quite a bit of shouting and confusion still here. Just to mention that last night, well, the Tunisian Red Crescent very bravely made a human chain to try and clear the area so that the most vulnerable, the women, children and sick, could get through. But due to the amount of numbers, they were simply overwhelmed. The situation was chaotic. Well,
you seem to be suggesting that it's calmed down a little now, but presumably the potential for this to ramp up again is still there if the events in Libya become more violent. How ready is the Tunisian government to deal with the possibility of more of this?
Well, that's our worry. That's what we're preparing for. And what you have to remember as well, at night it gets extremely cold here. I was amazed by how cold it was last night. It also started to rain. So you had thousands of people just jammed together in the cold and rain. So our worry is the shelter for people. We're going to try as quickly as possible to get more blankets, more shelter materials, and any basic humanitarian necessities to the area during the day. We've got people coming in from the different parts of the world who are experts in relief and in shelter, who are going to prepare for. We don't know what's going to happen tonight and the following nights. We hope it will be quieter and calmer, but we've got to be ready to react.
Joe Lowry in Tunisia, thank you for talking to us. Now, some diplomats believe that up to 2,000 people may have been killed already in this crackdown on anti-government protesters. Let's just bring you up to date once again with what the UN has now done to try to stop that. It's voted unanimously on Saturday night to impose a new set of sanctions on Muammar Gaddafi and his closest entourage. The UN resolution demands an end to the violence in Libya and a recognition of people's legitimate demands. And it calls for an investigation into the bloodshed and for attacks on civilians to be referred to the International Criminal Court. It also includes a ban on all new arms sales to Libya. But the UN Secretary General says it won't stop there.
I commend the Security Council for its decisive action today. In the days ahead, we will look for similarly decisive steps from the UN General Assembly and the international community as a whole. Today's measures are tough. In the coming days, if needed, even bolder action may become necessary.
Well, meanwhile, Australia has also moved to put pressure on Libya's government, imposing its own unilateral sanctions. The Foreign Minister, Kevin Rudd, has told AlJazeera that still more measures need to be taken against Gaddafi and his regime.
the actual teeth of this UN Security Council resolution are quite sharp. Firstly, in terms of the targeted sanctions against members of the regime, this is very important. The Gaddafi family has significant financial assets invested around the world, including in the United Kingdom and elsewhere. This therefore affects directly personal financial interests. Secondly, an arms embargo is necessary in order to prevent the further resupply of military equipment to those military units remaining supportive of Gaddafi. And thirdly, the criminal court reference is important. It's only the second time in the history of the UN this has been done. It's not so much that Gaddafi himself may take notice of this, but those underneath him must realise that in executing any command to take violent action against civilians, these people who have pulled triggers will be brought to justice as well.
Let me stop you there if I could for a moment. Just forgive me for interrupting, but the point remains that the fact is that Gaddafi has, for 40 years now, more or less snubbed his nose at the international community anyway. These threats, these sanctions will mean nothing to him, particularly since he's already vowed to die a martyr in Libya should the need arise. So my question remains, in between the time that these sanctions that you say are not toothless, they're very sharp-toothed, when they actually have an effect on the country in some sense, in between that time and now, there could still be enormous bloodshed. What is the international community going to do if he uses the arms he already has against his own people and starts causing some serious bloodshed?
The first thing I'd say also is that you said that Gaddafi himself may be contemptuous of these measures. Those underneath him who take his commands may actually be attentive to these measures, because that is the whole purpose of the International Criminal Court. However, I also believe that further action needs to be taken by the Council. You mentioned before the desirability of no-fly zones over Libya. We in Australia fully support that course of action. In my own correspondence with the President of the Security Council, I have said that Australia fully supports the imposition of no-fly zones within Libya itself.
Well, still to come on the programme. The vote counting continues in Ireland, but already it's apparent that the country's ruling party has suffered its worst defeat in nearly 80 years. And churchgoers in New Zealand forced to hold Sunday service outside as aftershocks threaten to flatten their place of worship.
Hello again. For the eastern parts of Europe, it's still pretty cold at the moment, but in the west, it is a lot milder now, and that's because we've got more cloud and rain piling in. It's dragging in the milder weather, but also for some of us, it's going to make things very wet and windy over the next few days. You can see it's in the southern section of our map where the cloud is brightest and whitest, and that's because here it's still developing. And for some of us in the Mediterranean, it's going to be really quite stormy as we head through the next couple of days. Very strong winds here and very heavy downpours as well. And that will also be affecting us in the northern coast of Africa as well. Take a look at the charts here for Tripoli. Very strong winds here, and to the west there's all that rain making its way through parts of Algeria and Tunisia, and this system will then slowly edge its way eastwards along that northern coast of Libya as we head through the next couple of days. Now meanwhile, a bit further east we've got another system here that's been working its way across parts of Turkey, but it's also dangling its feet further south as well, so Syria and Lebanon are also likely to be rather wet. Meanwhile, a little bit further east, you can see the winds here all being sucked up from the south. So they've got a lot of dust in with this as well, and it certainly will be quite warm. Head a bit further south, and here in Doha, we'll see the temperatures around 26 degrees, I think, for Monday. A fair amount of cloud with us, but the cloud gets thicker as you head across towards Iran, and here we'll see some rain.
The first Green Building Solutions Conference and Exhibition, Doha 2011. A unique opportunity to showcase your eco-friendly solutions. Don't miss this great opportunity to showcase your know-how and products. Come and join us.
14 competing teams, 13 different venues, 3 host nations. Cricket is part of the fabric of life here, and this competition is the pinnacle of the one-day game. We'll be bringing you all the action and reaction from India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. The Cricket World Cup on AlJazeera.
Hello, again a quick reminder of our top stories. The UN's Security Council has voted unanimously for sanctions against Libya's leader, Muammar Gaddafi, and his inner circle. The sanctions include travel bans, a freeze on assets, and an arms embargo. Reports suggest Libya's third largest city, Misrata, is now in the hands of the opposition supporters as the anti-Gaddafi movement gets ever closer to the capital, Tripoli. And with the spreading violence, the humanitarian situation is worsening. Governments around the world, including from Qatar, are sending food and medical aid. Many countries are still trying to get citizens out of Libya. Well, in the east of the country, Gaddafi's opponents have been in charge for close to a week now. And Jackie Ronan has been to visit one of Gaddafi's so-called palaces, which has been ransacked and left in a mess by the anti-Gaddafi crowd.
Every dictator has his palaces, and Muammar Gaddafi is no exception. We toured this once sumptuous residence on the outskirts of Al-Baida, now burned and looted by local people. The Libyan leader and his guests could enjoy a covered swimming pool, a sauna and a jacuzzi, all set in landscaped gardens planted with fragrant hedges. At the end of one pathway, a heavy airtight door leads down to an underground world. A rabbit warren of staircases, reinforced doors and narrow passages. The complex appears designed to withstand an attack by unconventional weapons.
So now we're getting into the nerve centre of Gaddafi's bunker. And you can see here that he's really set up to withstand a nuclear apocalypse. He's got a whole air system down here. He's got emergency generators. And you can see that he's got air fans, fire alarm. If we look over here, all the different filters, water pumps, you see. He could quite possibly survive, or he could have survived down here for several months. And it's actually really interesting as well, when you look at some of these little stickers here, it's showing the maintenance that was run. You can actually see, look, the last test run on the 14th of January this year, test run okay. So this equipment was being seriously maintained and seriously kept up to date. And it would appear that it's all the work of a Swiss company called Lua. So here we've got an American company here. This is